So hello guys, today we are looking at another maisto Tailwinds aircraft model review. So today we've got the F-22 Raptor, an American 5th generation stealth fighter aircraft. So we'll first look at the fighter aircraft itself, its history and how it was developed. And then later on we'll get to the final review of the actual maisto Tailwinds aircraft. So if you want to skip to that part, it's entirely logical that you should do it. So yeah, let's just get on with the video. This is the maisto Tailwinds F-22 Raptor. As you can see, it's a very gorgeously replicated model of the actual F-22, which is also a very sleek looking aircraft. Anyway, so as you can see, the details on this are very well maintained. There are the folding doors for the missiles. There's the inscription for the F-22 Raptor, and there's the landing gear, and the cockpit is just marvelously done. So the story of the F-22 begins in the 1970s, where we had two prominent companies which manufactured stealth aircraft. Only two companies in the world which did that at that time. So one was basically Northrop with the B-2 Spirit bomber, and the other was Lockheed, which manufactured the first stealth fighter aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk. So the Nighthawk entered the United States military service in 1981, and basically it was used in the deposing the dictator of Panama in the 1980s Operation Just Cause. So yeah, that was that, and the F-117 did a really good job there. So in 1981, Ronald Reagan took office, and he was very vocally anti-communist, more so than even his earlier sort of predecessors. And in the 1980s, the United States and the Soviets had a sort of like detente, which is basically de-escalation of military action towards each other. After Vietnam and all of the Cold War stuff, they decided to take it a step down, but there was still tension, like heaps of it. When he took office, he publicly denounced the Soviet Union and he called them as evil. And in 1983, Yuri Andropov, which was, of course, the Soviet premier at that time, responded with an equally wordy response. So 1980s saw the US kind of scared of Soviet SAM systems, surface to air missile systems. The SS-27 was really the predominant Soviet system of the time, and it presented a real threat over European airspace if it was deployed in a hypothetical Cold War situation. So to counter that, the US had placed Pershing 2 systems in Europe, but it wasn't enough for sort of quenching US anxiety over air superiority, which was a critical part of their war doctrine ever since World War II. Eventually, Ronald Reagan started a strategic defense initiative, the Star Wars program, as it is very popularly known. In October 1982, we see the United States Chiefs of Staff meet with industrial complexes to determine how a future fifth generation aircraft would look like and come out with specifications for the aircraft. And in 1986, the specifications were finalized. Then the specifications featured a fifth generation aircraft would be able to super cruise for like 600 miles and travel at speeds of like 1.5 Mach at the same range, 600-mile range. It was also supposed to sort of be a good capable dogfighter, sort of better than everything United States military had at that time. It also had to have like stealth qualities, because based on the Red Baron study, which evaluated air contesting and conflicts from all the way to World War II, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and the Red Baron study basically came up with one idea, that killing aircraft was far more easy when the enemy was not seen, was not detected. That's why stealth became an integral part of the requirements for the fifth generation aircraft. The competition really started to pick up when the prototypes were created. The military industrial complex was assigned two YF2 Type 2 prototypes. So, and these were very expensive. Stealth aircraft are really expensive, and basically if a military contractor couldn't get the contract itself, which was initially set for like $2 billion, the company could go bankrupt, and that is a serious proposition for a military industrial complex. So A lot of companies basically allied each other and presented a united front and a united prototype for the Demval competition. And so we had basically two main groups which had a real chance of winning the competition, which were led by Northrop and Lockheed, which had experience in developing stealth aircraft previously. So they had a lot of credibility with them and they had a lot more chance of succeeding. So with Lockheed, we see Boeing and General Dynamics allied to it, and I couldn't really get specifics on Northrop, and I would list the information that I've got from sources. It would be in the description or in the comments. I don't really know, but I'll mention it there, and I can't really put in links anyway. So yeah, that's that. And basically the competition began, and YF-22 coming up as a sort of alien spacecraft looking stuff with its diamond platform wings and the huge V-tails. Two companies were selected, the Northrop faction and of course the Lockheed faction. And Lockheed drastically changed its design in July of 1987, which really came as a shock to the defense industry, but Lockheed insisted that the upgradations were necessary. So they basically came up with a clipped delta wing design and made it more conventional looking, and the changes were worked out from July 87 to October 1987. Later on 1990s, the tests began on the fighters. So Lockheed developed two prototypes and Northrop developed two prototypes. Lockheed came up with the YF-22 and then Northrop came up with the YF-23. The YF-22 narrowly outshone the YF-23 in its capability to super cruise, and during tests they also fired missiles. So they basically fired two sidewinders and an AMRAAM, which gave them a little bit of an advantage over evaluation when it came to the competition. So in April 1991, Lockheed basically won the contract. The F-22 went into production, and the Northrop prototype, the YF-23, was sidelined basically. The F-22 Raptor was unveiled to the general public in April of 1997, and this aircraft entered service in like 2005 or 2008. I'm not really sure, but I'll list the sources so you can check for yourself. But the aircraft program for the F-22 really hit some snags for some part, and this aircraft was designed to replace the F-15, which wasn't really outshone but sort of like evenly matched with the Sukhoi 27, which really sort of gave the US Defense Department chills, because they couldn't really accept if the Soviets could have an aircraft really equal to their capabilities. And the Soviets had this typical feature of making a lot more aircrafts than the US ever did, so they were really afraid that a similar quality aircraft could be out manufactured and out produced. So that's why they came up with the first fifth generation aircraft, the F-22. In the Gulf War, the F-15s really showed their capability, and the F-117s did that too. So the question came up that is why was the F-22 necessary if its predecessor was doing a pretty great job? But these trepidations and worries were unfounded when in March 2003, one F-22 and five F-15s had this sort of combat exercise, which was a kill or be killed sortie, and the F-22 outshone all five F-15s, so nobody asked questions after that. The F-22 had the capacity to carry 8 missiles and a gun which was mounted somewhere along here, and the 8 missiles, out of them 6 were in these bifold planes and two were in these sidewards planes. So these contain sidewinders and the central contain other missiles and weapons. Alright, so the central bifold planes in the mid body of the aircraft had hydropneumatic launchers, so they basically punched out missiles, which looks badass, of course. And the sidewinders had sort of trapeze wing launchers, and that's that. The aircraft manufactured separately, as was agreed by the different companies which formed the Lockheed Alliance. The front fuselage and the cockpit was manufactured by Lockheed. The mid body was manufactured by General Dynamics at Fort Worth, Texas, and the wings and the tails mentioned here were manufactured by Boeing in Seattle. It entered United States service, and sadly, the USAF decided to retire it very recently, like 3 or 4 months ago, and yeah, it's sort of unfortunate, really. But the F-22, needless to be said, was an excellent aircraft and the first proper fifth generation stealth aircraft. Like around 300 were made, not the original 650 that were envisaged by the Advanced Tactical Fighter ATF contract. But yeah, it was made in large numbers, like 300 is still enough for stealth aircraft to be made. And although the fuselage of stealth aircraft can't necessarily be upgraded, unlike a fourth generation aircraft like the Su-27, which could be upgraded, because if you upgrade the fuselage and change it in any way, it distorts the shape and makes it detectable by radar. But the onboard computer systems could always be upgraded, so it features an integrated targeting system differentiation which allowed the pilots to focus on really going against the target rather than operating the aircraft. Basically, yeah, 60% of the manual handling was done by computers, and the pilot had this sort of oversight to focus on command and control and following targets and eliminating them. That's that about the fighter history and nature of the aircraft. So now we really look at the maisto Tailwinds model of this aircraft and whether you should get it or not. I think it's a seriously dumb question. Like, you should obviously get this aircraft if you, in the Master Tailwind series, if you can get it for cheap. And most Master Tailwind series are really cheap to sort of buy. And this aircraft just replicates the actual F-22 bolt by bolt, rivet to rivet. Its front look is obviously very appealing. Accurate details here just make it more appealing to me than it ever was. And this sort of uh, thrust vectoring engine nozzles it has back there is also replicated very accurately. I think you should really get one because it's just fabulous and it's very suited for a person who is interested in aircraft or military history in general. It is a very good model and a very cheap one at that. If you look at sort of other more expensive companies like Hasegawa and Revell making sort of bigger models but which are really expensive and a lot more difficult to sort of assemble together. This thing doesn't need any assembly. It comes really packed and you could just whip it out and arrange it on your desk or somewhere you want it to be seen. Earlier they used to supply it with stands as would be noticeable by the slit here, but now the stands aren't really available now, I think so. But yeah, it's very fabulous regardless and you should really get it if you can come across one.